Real Enigmas and Theories is back again with another video. If you've been following me long enough, you probably already know what I'm about to say. Shit, Ragabi got Mark out here drinking Dr. Sebi's sea moss gel with ginger and goat semen. Pause.
But I did accidentally take a sip of it later because I forgot he said that.
Mark had to take his ass to the bathroom and go fart in peace. Nah, yo. Severance Season 2, Episode 5 is in the books, and I have to say it's bittersweet for real. We're halfway through the season, answers and more mysteries pouring in. The symbolism is off the charts, and you know we right on top of it. The 1978 symbolism. The milk and egg symbolism has merged together to give us a new hidden message. And I was right about the left ear symbolism, and we'll probably see more of that too. And why are they concealing the whereabouts of the ORTBO? Also, we have to talk about Devin and Ricken, Milchick and Miss Wong, and Evil Hodor and Helly. There's a lot we have to cover. But before we do that, go ahead and tap that screen for me a few times by doing all that dope YouTube stuff. And if you're new here, welcome. This video will contain spoilers if you're not caught up to Season 2, Episode 5 yet. So without further ado, let's cook. Every once in a while, I tell y'all to pull out your magnifying glasses. You might want to do that for this one. Now, this episode started off creepy as hell. The guy, as Felicia calls him, was whistling while strolling through the halls of the severed floor, and he was on his way to O&D. Now, even though I'm starting this off at the beginning, we're not going to go through this chronologically. I just thought that this would be the perfect time to give you my opinions about the testing floor / exports hallway, the reason why O&D no longer takes the goods to the elevator, and what I think is really going on here. Now, I don't think Gemma's the only test subject down there. I think there's several, if not many. O&D used to take materials to the elevator and send them down. I believe that they were preparing the testing floor for the testing subjects before they got there. I think that the test subjects like Gemma are sleeper agents that get sent to various missions like the Lexington File. These locations and data for the missions are what MDR refines and are directly connected to each one of the subjects. The subjects are trained and observed on the testing floor, and O&D has been providing them with all the tools they need for the sleeper agents to have basic understanding of the world so that they can acclimate into position when they're sent to the location of that file name. The location could be a town, a state, or a street, depending on what the name is, or one of Lumon's competitors. Watering pots and other normal objects are mass produced to send millions of sleeper agents. Yes, I said millions. Millions of severed sleeper agents that have probably been abducted like Miss Casey. And I'm going to get to why I suspect such a large number when we talk about Devin and Ricken, who are directly tied to the Lexington letters. Remember, they moved to Kier after that bombing at the Lexington. Now, other objects like hatches and those cards that we see are most likely used to train those agents in some sorts of combat, and they're probably trained in other skills as well. Now, the guy that we see here, he's using a black key card, and he's wearing a scrub-like jacket like an actual medical professional. Now, I'm not totally sure on why they have dental equipment, but it may be to teach or train the subject some dentistry skills. And this ties heavily into the 1978 and 1981 symbolism. I know it sounds crazy, but trust me, by the end of this video, I go back into it and it'll make you understand where I'm coming from a little bit more. The 78 and 81 symbolism is definitely heavy in this episode, but it was all there the whole time, even since the very first episode. We're going to get to it though. Now, one thing about this episode is that it contained a lot of vague statements about the location of the ORTBO. Not to mention, they totally skipped over showing us how they got MDR back into their places to go back into being outies. This was done on purpose, and Milchick starts to give us the biggest clue before Helly cuts him off. He was explaining what the Glasgow Block was. Then he finishes by telling a story of the Gleck-Shubin. Milchick out here sounding like Richard Pryor in See No Evil, Hear No Evil.
Have you ever heard the story of the Gleck-Shubin?
From Sweden, I'm a Swede and you're a Swede.
But the story is pretty much saying that Helly used the block so that she could join the Innies. Now, we know that the Innies can come outside, but they have to use the OTC protocol. So if they were really outside, then why would the Glasgow Block be necessary? If the Innies are outside, then they use the OTC. But you wouldn't need a Glasgow Block to chill with some Innies that are on OTC outside. So if the Glasgow Block is being used, then they would have to be somewhere on the severed floor. When Helena is on the severed floor with Mark in the goat room in that awkward non-kissing scene that they had in the hallway, she had the block on. In other words, the Glasgow Block is only necessary on the severed level. And what it does is when everybody else's chip kicks in from going through the elevator, hers doesn't. But then you remove the Glasgow Block while she's on the severed floor, and bang, we hear the ding and Helly comes back. Now, the Glasgow Block thing brings up an entire different question that I haven't seen anybody talking about yet. Who has used this before? If Helen is the first Egan to get severed, then they must have let another severed employee come down there with the Glasgow Block on. I mean, they didn't even show us what the return looked like, and that's for a reason. And you have all of the information given about the ORTBO was very vague. Like Milchick's ORTBO failure makes mention of the outside world, but it doesn't tell you the full context. And Evil Hodor saying that they went on an outdoor retreat is just pretty much repeating the acronym in the first place. So who has used the block before? I know that some people think that Cobel is severed, but I don't think so. I personally think that she wants to be reintegrated with her mother's chip by eventually getting her mother's chip implanted when she learns that reintegration is possible. So this means if she puts her mother's chip in her head, that she can reintegrate with her mom. I mean, it's weird, but I think that's what she's doing. Hear me out. When we see Cobel switching up the way that she acts, I think she's imitating her mother. This is why Cobel says she had an atheist mother, but Selvig says her mother was a Christian. Maybe the Selvig personality is how her mother was, and the Harmony Cobel is her true self. Now, perhaps Cobel's mother was a Christian, and her mother became atheist. So when you hear Selvig say that her mother was a Christian, she's talking about Cobel's grandmother. And when Cobel is talking about her atheist mother, she's referring to her own mother who was raised Christian. I mean, it's clear that Cobel's switching up of personalities is not due to any kind of protocol. She's in total control of her crazy. She flips that shit on and off whenever she wants. I mean, she dials into this nurturing motherly side and then back to her true self whenever she needs it. That's how she responded to realizing that Mark's Innie was at the book reading. I mean, this is the lady who was de-icing her stoop with a hairdryer. And speaking of dryers, Mark needs to get his shit fixed. He running around here with mildew suit jackets and shit. Man, we got to do better than that. You can't just let people come over your crib and live like this, man. You saw this woman beat Grainer in the head with that bat, and I really don't think she's giving you all the full truth either. It's just something tells me she's withholding some information. But nah, Ragabi's cool, because I mean, she's getting my man reintegrated and everything. You know, she's trying to help him out, but she's still lying, and she's deadly. I wouldn't be sleeping in the same crib with her. But that last scene with Ragabi, though, it does take us into some heavy symbolism, and we're going to talk about it real quick. But first, let's point out some other symbolisms, get those out the way real quick, and come back to it. I know y'all saw Evil Hodor throwing up the Baphomet sign, so there's your weekly dose of goat symbolism. One of the pieces of symbolism that I pointed out in my last video, it actually showed up in this episode, and that's the left ear symbolism. I noticed the left ear symbolism when Irv had his ear hanging out the entire episode and it was supposed to be so cold out there. And then it pops right up in this episode when Dylan cuts the man's whole ear off. And then having that melon skin on his head looking like a yarmulke was crazy though. Shout out to Tiffany and T. McCann for pointing out a few more left ear symbolisms in the comments of that video. I'll put a link to that video at the end of this video so you could go check it out and see how much we got right. But T. McCann pointed out that the board is always in Natalie's left ear, and Kier's side profile carving in the main entrance displays his left ear. And before that seating change in MDR, our 4 refiners were seated in a way that their left ears were pointing at the next. And then in Mark's last wellness session, the balance was turned all the way to the left and didn't produce any volume until it was turned to the right. Tiffany caught that one, and that kind of matches with the one that I pointed out where Cobel turns the balance knob on her tape deck to the right. I know a lot of people thought she was turning the volume up, but that was actually the balance knob. And in my pregame live stream right before the episode aired, I pointed out the egg symbolism in Irv's dream. Yo, you got to catch these live streams. If you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so that you can go ahead and be notified when I'm going live. I drop a lot of information in there that I don't drop in my videos. But when the computer screen shows Helena's face, you can see the word egg spelled several times all over the screen. The egg symbolism has been in both seasons real heavy with the egg dropping contest. You had the deviled eggs. Helly said that the goats lay the eggs. And in this season, Devin called Mark a good egg. And now we get the milk and the egg symbolism coming together with Mark going to get eggnog for Ragabi. Now the milking symbolism came with the man milking the goats and Selvig teaching Devin how to nurse. And now that it's coming together with the egg symbolism, that presents a definite structure for a pregnancy/fertility reference. I mean, even Helena's face looks like a sonogram in this image here. Now, you had Milchick ushering in the 9 seconds of silence for Irv, and I'm sure that represented the 9 core principles, but it also represents the 9-month gestation period for a newborn's growth. Now, Irv's actual tenure at Lumon sheds some light on how long a quarter on the severed floor is. Irv worked for Lumon for 9 years, and he served for the quarters of 870 through 882, which is 12 quarters. So let's do the math here. You got 9 years over 12 quarters. So 9 over 12 would equal 0.75 years. So that's what? 0.75 years per quarter. And 0.75 years is 9 months, which is also the gestation period. So now we know that a refiner's quarter is 9 months. Irv is also connected to that 1978 symbolism, but we're going to get to that by the end. Stay tuned. Now, I have to talk about Devin and Ricken before we go there, because there's some information that sheds some serious light on what Lumon is actually doing, as I mentioned near the beginning of this video. Now, I'm sure that most of us felt like Devin and Ricken were an odd couple, am I right? I've actually heard people asking what she saw in him. And even seeing her sitting there with him and his friends, she seemed to be out of place. It was like she was forcing her interactions with Ricken's friends. And Devin even seems to be annoyed with Ricken at times herself. Maybe she was rocking with Ricken for what he was able to provide, and he calls her out on it right here.
Unless me selling millions of copies of my book and the life that that manages to give us has somehow lost its appeal for you.
Okay, whatever. I'm gonna go to bed.
And she wasn't even trying to hear that shit. She just went in the room. But the more interesting part of their conversation is when Ricken states that he'll be selling 1 million copies of his book that's supposed to be going to the severed floor of Lumon locations all over the world. Now let that sink in for a second. We know that his book is going to be used to help make severed employees more compliant. Now, why would you need 1 million copies for severed workers if there aren't 1 million copies of severed people? Moreover, I'm sure that each severed worker wouldn't be getting their own personal book. I'm thinking that each department would get one, just like we see all the handbooks and the 3 appendixes in MDR. So this would mean one for multiple employees, which would mean tens or hundreds of millions of severed employees. Now, Lumon has already told us about the amount of locations that they have, and we also know that other companies have adopted the severance procedure, which I'm sure Lumon leases and manages that tech to them. So they'll probably be getting some of those copies as well. Now, if I'm right about the plans of Lumon with those sleeper agents and government officials, the media, law enforcement, medical and death processing people, as Ragabi mentions, she did say that they had people in the coroner's office and everything. And they probably have people in other areas of society, big and small. Then this theory that stems from Ricken's millions of copies and the 1978 symbolism is not only going to blow your mind, but it's going to make you look at what's happening all around us right now. In my very first Severance video, I revealed that 1978 has been an important number in several shows in the past 5 years. And that's just what I noticed. And according to Mark's ID, he was born April 3rd, 1978. And if you watch the TV show From, the character Victor was trapped in that town in 1978. But Mark's birthday is on the actual date of the 50th Academy Awards. And Christopher Walken, who plays Bert, was in a movie that won Best Picture that year called Annie Hall. And in this movie, I talked about this in my first video, but I'm gonna briefly go over it. In the movie, he describes a scene that's very similar to the scene where Irv drives to Bert's house. Now, I revealed that Irv drives a 1978 Chevy Nova, and we also know that Cobel drives a 1978 White Rabbit. The funny thing, in that scene where Irv is driving to Bert's house, those 2 cars literally pass each other. Another very esoteric 1978 clue was when MDR was looking at Ricken's book in the supply closet. Mark reads a passage that ends off saying, "My friend, the hour is yours." Now, using the Pythagorean numerology system, the word yours breaks down to the root number of 8. That number breaks down to 13679, which equals 26, and 2 plus 6 equal 8. Dylan cuts Mark off to finish the passage, and then he says that page 197 slaps. And there you have it, the 197, and the word yours breaks down to the root number of 8. Now, this last episode doubles down more on the 1978 nods and adds the infamous 1981 nod in there as well. We can see Mark refining these numbers before he leaves for the day and runs into Milchick in the elevator. The only 2 times we see what he's refining, it was these set of numbers, both times. The real world connection to these numbers speaks volumes about the fruition of Lumon's plans so far and what they could be striving for in the future. I already took you back to 1978 with the Christopher Walken movie, but let's take a deeper look. 1978 was a spiritual transition year. It sat between the rebellious chaos of the early 70s and the emerging materialism of the 80s. This is the year that we saw the final remnants of the counterculture giving away to the rise of corporate consumerism and convenience. The first known computer bulletin board system went live in 1978, and that foreshadowed the age of the internet, digital control systems, and the dawn of data tracking and surveillance. This led us right into modern day AI, social engineering, data mining, and algorithmic control. And this is exactly what we see at Lumon. The digital realm is just another version of the Akashic records where all human thoughts are cataloged. And it wouldn't be a stretch to say that Lumon has a database of every thought that arrives through a severance chip. 1978 was the foundation of modern surveillance and digital control systems. And we spoke about the numbers that Mark was refining with the 78, but then we have also the 81. And both of those numbers are actually referenced in a conversation with Natalie and Evil Hodor.
We're close, Helena. What's he at? 78%?
81.
as of Friday.
It won't be much longer.
Now, I have revealed the 1978 connections throughout the show, and I can assure you that these percentages aren't just some arbitrary numbers that the writer decided to put in the script. It has a hidden meaning, and I think we're on to something, just like the left ear symbolism and the eggs. It's crazy because I was talking about them in the last video, and them shits pop up in the next episode. 1981 is when the digital control grid became real. IBM launched its first PC in 1981, which later led to the full-scale digital age and marked the transition from hidden government-controlled computers to mass accessibility of computers at home. Microsoft's MS-DOS was introduced, giving birth to the world we live in today where everything is controlled by software. I know that you guys noticed Miss Wong using that dot matrix printer, right? 1978, we saw the birth of computer networks, but 1981 gave power to individuals through personal computers. And this was the first step towards the mass digital dependency that we see today. It laid the foundation for the internet, and it laid the foundation for the modern surveillance and AI. And keep in mind that Dieter Egan is an anagram for AI generated. And the computers that we see at Lumon definitely share the aesthetic of this revolutionary time period. In that Lumon is watching commercial with Natalie, they used an actual breakdancing clip from MTV, which was also launched in 1981. And let's not forget about the MK Ultra experiments that were still going on during this time, which is very Lumon-esque. And there's something else that I noticed about the way that Any Mark was acting. At first glance, he's kind of acting like a dickhead. And I know a lot of people probably feel like it's from some trauma from Helena and what she did. But something Mark said to Dylan, and Dylan repeated, made me wonder if Mark is just trying to conceal his plans to find Gemma. Walk with me for a second. With Irv gone and Helly back, the first thing most would do is get emotional like we see with Dylan and Helly right now. This leaves them in a controllable state, and Milchick is right on top of it because he knows that if you can control someone's emotions, then you can control their motivation. And if you can control their motivation, you can control their behavior. But Mark sees this game, and he's been seeing it since the very first episode. Look how he outsmarted Milchick. Look how he called him a shambolic rube. He's been seeing it from the door. Mark seeing a picture of his Audi's wife and realizing that it was Miss Casey has put him on a mission that he is not stirred away from at all. Don't get me wrong, he is double dipping with Helena, but he thought it was Helly, and he knows that Miss Casey / Gemma is his Audi's wife. He just wants a life of his own. But the dope part is he's willing to help his Audi. Now he's having reintegration episodes, and he knows that his Audi has started the process of searching for Gemma as well. Remember Mark telling Helena that if they find Miss Casey, that he'd take her to the staircase and his Audi would know what to do from there? This was even before Mark got reintegrated. Now he's seeing visions of Gemma and visions of pills. He knows his Audi is up to something, and he's just waiting without telling anybody. He's not getting upset about Irv because Irv is still alive. And he not only says this to them flat out, but he cryptically says it to Dylan as well.
Sure, as long as it's quick.
Quick?
Quick, yes. So it doesn't take up the whole day?
Well said.
What you should have caught there was the word quick, because the word quick originally meant not dead. So there you have it. Some esoteric symbolism, some hidden meanings, a little bit of history, heavy theories in there. And if you're still here, please consider tapping that screen for me a few times by liking, sharing, and hopping down in the comments to get the conversation started. And if you're not subbed yet, hopefully this will be the video to make you do it. Anyway, just a little something to think about while we wait on the next episode. That's all for my video today. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.